Good afternoon. Welcome to BBC News. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of committing the most terrible war crime since the Second World War and called for trials like those held after the defeat of the Nazis. He was addressing the United Nations for the first time since Russia invaded. Russia has again denied that its forces were responsible for killing civilians in Ukraine. That's despite growing evidence of atrocities in the country, with the focus currently on the city of Bucha near Kiev. New satellite images taken in mid-March by space imaging firm Maxar appear to show bodies lying in the streets, while Russian forces were still in control of the area. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg described it as unbearable brutality. President Zelensky says more than 300 people were killed and tortured in Bucha, and he's been addressing the UN Security Council in the last hour after visiting the town himself. Meanwhile, the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and top diplomat Josep Borrell will visit Kiev this week to meet President Zelensky. It comes as the EU has outlined 6 new sanctions against Russia. They include an import ban on coal, on transactions of 4 key banks, and a ban on Russian ships accessing EU ports. Anna Foster has the latest now from Ukraine. I beg your pardon, we're going to hear first from Volodymyr Zelensky when he was speaking at the UN this afternoon.
Right away, the Russian military and those who gave them orders must be brought to justice immediately for war crimes in Ukraine. Anyone who has given criminal orders and carried out them by killing our people will be brought before the tribunal, which should be similar to the Nuremberg tribunals. I would like to remind Russian diplomats that a man like von Ribbentrop has not escaped punishment for crimes in World War II. I would also like to remind you that Adolf Eichmann also did not go unpunished. Nobody of them escaped the punishment. But the main thing is today it's time to transform the system, the United Nations. So therefore, I propose to convene a global conference, and we can do it here in peaceful Kyiv in order to determine how we are going to reform the world security system, how we will rely, how do we establish guarantee of recognition of borders and integrity of states and countries, how we will assert the rule of international law. It is now clear that the goals set in San Francisco in 1945 for the creation of a global security international organization have not been achieved, and it is impossible to achieve them without reforms. Therefore, we must do everything in our power to pass on to the next generation an effective UN with the ability to respond preventively to security challenges and thus guarantee peace, prevent aggression and force aggressors to peace, have the determination and ability to punish if the principles of peace are violated. There can be no more exceptions or privileges. Everybody must be equal, all participants of international relations, regardless of economic strength, geographical area, and individual ambitions.
Ukrainian President speaking earlier at the UN Security Council. Let's go to Moscow and speak to our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg. Steve, what's the likely reaction going to be to Zelensky's call for that Nuremberg-style hearing?
Well, I mean, if you think that the leadership of the Russian Federation is about to put its hands up and say, yes, we committed war crimes, and catch the next plane to Nuremberg for a war crimes tribunal, don't hold your breath. Russia is doing right now, Russian officials are doing right now what they have done for years. Every time they are accused of something by the West, whether that is the Salisbury poisonings, or accused of meddling in US elections, or accused of shooting down the Malaysia Airlines MH17 flight, or of attempting to murder Alexei Navalny. That is to deny everything and to point the finger back. So in this particular case, we heard the Russian ambassador to the UN say that all the accusations made against his country were ungrounded, and he pointed the finger back at President Zelensky and accused Ukrainian chiefs of war crimes. This is a pattern we've seen for many years.
Privately, though, in the background, what pressure is President Putin and those around him in the Kremlin likely to feel, if any?
I'm not sure they're likely to feel any pressure. Yesterday, it was quite interesting, I went to a press conference given by the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, and I asked Mr. Lavrov, look, the American president has accused your president, Vladimir Putin, of being a war criminal and said he should be held accountable. What does that say about Russia's current international reputation? And he basically dismissed the question, turned it round and started talking about American politicians who initiated the war in Iraq and conflicts in Syria and in Libya, and said that all Russia cared about, really, was what the Russian people thought about what Moscow calls its special military operation in Ukraine. I think Russia has long stopped caring about its international reputation and image.
So what would it matter then if Russia were to be suspended from, removed from the United Nations Human Rights Council, which is what the American ambassador to the UN has suggested this afternoon?
Well, it would be a symbolic move, but I don't think it would change much. And I think that the Russians will be half expecting it. I think back to what happened, I think it was a month ago, when Sergei Lavrov was making a speech, an address to the Human Rights Council remotely, just after Russia had begun its offensive in Ukraine. And I think about 100 diplomats walked out of the hall and refused to listen to Mr. Lavrov. That was a signal, I think, about what a large portion of the international community thought about what Russia was doing. So I don't think it would come as a surprise to Russia if they were kicked out of the Human Rights Council, and I don't think it would change the direction in which Russia is moving.
Steve, for the moment, thank you very much. Steve Rosenberg, our Russia editor.